We are live.
We are live. Well, welcome to Life on the Line podcast, Lifeline Community. I'm the lead pastor, Bryan Hurlbut, here at Lifeline Community in suburban Salt Lake City, Utah, West Jordan, Utah to be exact. Joined by my sidekick, Bradley P. Homer, who is our pastor of worship and media. Bradley, tell me about it, man. How you doing today?
I'm just living the life out in the rough edges of suburbia in Copperton. Yeah, we've had a locust infestation this year.
Really?
It's been pretty severe.
Wow.
Yeah, it almost took out my whole garden.
It's dangerous out there in
Yeah,
Copperton.
it's the Wild West.
It is the Wild West. So we're going to talk today, Life on the Line, where we talk about issues and of philosophy and theology, politics. We're going to talk a little bit about evil and think about evil in maybe a couple of different ways. This is on my mind a bit, Brad, because of a trip I just took.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Babe.
So you're reminded of evil because you took a trip?
Yeah.
Did you go to Vegas?
No.
Oh, okay.
Wendover. No, not really. I went to Poland, and I was speaking in Poland, and part of the trip is we were in Krakow, and Krakow is famous for a number of reasons. There's an old medieval square in Krakow that's one of the oldest in Europe, and there's it's the sort of home in the home parish. I was actually in the parish church that Pope John Paul II got started. So
okay.
he's from Krakow.
Tell me one thing. Did you have a pierogi?
I did.
How was it?
No, I had pierogies. I did. I had pierogi.
It's like Lay's. You only can eat one. Not really.
You can't really do it.
Not with
And then I had
pierogies.
what in the Northeast we call pigeons, but I think they call them galupkis or something like that. But it's basically meat, like beef, mixed with rice and stuff like that, and then it's wrapped in cabbage, cooked, and you put like a red sauce over it. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Anyway. So yeah, I had good food. Lots of kielbasa, enough kielbasa to like keep me for the rest of my life. Anyway, so it's a lot of sausage. They like their sausage over there, bud. So anyway, hour and a half.
So lots of great stuff in Krakow.
Awesome. Yeah, it was great. Interesting, in Krakow is many of our listeners will be familiar with Schindler's List. Oskar Schindler, who used his factory to save 1,200 Jews from extermination. And his factory is in Krakow, and they have turned that into a museum. They turned it into a museum, I think, shortly after Spielberg went over there and filmed Schindler's List. They filmed a lot of it in Krakow. And so my wife and I were able to tour the factory, and it's kind of a museum devoted a lot to 1939 and 1945 Krakow in the context of World War II. But the thing that really that brings about some significant things about evil, but one that really brings it out, I guess I'd say, in a really significant way, is the trip. We took a tour an hour and a half west of Krakow to Auschwitz, and often referred to as Auschwitz-Birkenau. Birkenau was the second. There were 3 Auschwitz camps, and Birkenau was the second one. And so Auschwitz, a little history, but Auschwitz, the camp, it was the town had a different name, and the town that got renamed by the Germans, Auschwitz. And Auschwitz was basically they took this old like military installation that was there that had brick barracks and stuff like this. Looks kind of like, if you're local in Utah, it actually kind of looks a little bit like Fort Douglas up in
You can imagine the long, thin barracks.
road brick buildings and 2-story buildings. And there's a bunch of, like, I don't know, maybe 30 of them or so on this thing. And the Nazis took that over, turned that into sort of a work camp. Originally brought in Polish people that were part of that, and then they brought in Jews. They vacated like 8 towns, I think it was, around the area, basically destroyed all the homes, took all the lumber, and they built Birkenau. And Birkenau was huge. Birkenau had at one point like 90,000 people at a time living in it. And it was like, I mean, it's vast in terms of just imagine just a kind of like where you and I are from in upstate New York. If you were to go out into a farmer's field, but imagine a farmer's field about as far as your eye can see, and just filled with these wood, these were not brick, but wood, one leveled like road barns almost, they looked like, and just hundreds of them, huge complex. And so Birkenau, famously, if you Google Auschwitz, you're going to see an image, almost the image that comes up almost every time, and it's the railroad tracks that run. You got a building, and there's like the railroad tracks running through this like tunnel in the building, right? And that's called the Death Gate. And that actually is Auschwitz II, which is Birkenau. That picture is actually from there. And they're right in the same town. But they would drive the rail car in, and then when they got through that gate, they'd come down into the middle of the buildings and they would empty out. And as they emptied out, those Jews, largely Jews, there were about I think 1.3 million people that came through Auschwitz. And those Jews, when they would get off the rail car, if they were sick or they were old or unwell, they would often be taken, especially later after 1942 and 43 or so, they would be taken right to be killed. And then you'd have the men, some of the women, and some of the children who would be, stick around because they would be, particularly the men and women, would be able-bodied labor for the labor camp portion of it. And then they had all kinds of crazy experiments. Some will be familiar with the name Joseph Mengele, and Joseph Mengele, and that was he did a bunch of science experiments there on twins and things like that, horrible stuff. So we toured this, and it was, I mean, absolutely the epitome of evil, right? So when we went through the first encampment, we're going through and you finish, it's quite sober. Obviously, you go through a number of things. There's displays where you see just, I mean, literally tons, and I mean that literally tons of human hair that they shaved off and locks. And it's just unreal. Tons of shoes, pots and pans, luggage with people's names on them, all these kinds of things.
So basically everything precious that would apply to a person of that time.
Yeah. I mean,
including their hair.
And it's like you see things that it brings it very much viscerally home because you're looking at like a style of a shoe, and sometimes you just see, you go, here's a woman who had a shoe with a little anchor on it and this kind of thing, and you look at that and you think, okay, so she's concerned certain styles of her day, stylish woman, and here this is her shoe that's left. It's just very personal items like that. And then as you finish, there's a couple of things you see along the way. One of the things is in the basement of one of the barracks in Auschwitz, the first camp that was the military installation was taken over. They had cells that were like maybe 8 by 8 or so. And they had a handful of these cells in the basement, but one cell in particular had a metal grating that went over an external vent that mitigated airflow so that very minimal amounts of airflow could go down into the basement ventilation in system and into this cell. And that's because this cell, and when you would walk up to the cell, it wasn't like the only way you could look in the cell was you would be looking through a peephole into the cell. That's how you saw in. Okay, so you go up and you look in a peephole and you see, and it's just this concrete walled cell 8 by 8. On the outside, you see this grated ventilation thing covering the window, and that's because in that cell, it was a starvation chamber, and they would starve people in that particular cell. Outside of that ventilation, sort of where that ventilation system was, and just outside of there is a wall, and it was called the death wall, and that's where they lined people up and shot them to death. the tour of Auschwitz, the first camp before you get to Birkenau, finishes, and you go down into the gas chamber. And so you actually walk through what started as a crematorium where they would burn bodies, but then later became a chamber that they would kill people in, and they would take toxic chemicals and they would have them in canisters. They would get on the roof of this because it was like a bunker, like dug out into the ground, and they would get on top of the roof, and they would then open the ventilation, drop down the toxic chemicals, let them permeate the concrete gas bunker. The gas chamber was like a concrete bunker, and kill people. And so you kind of go through that. You're like in there, you know. And then you go to Birkenau and you see the nightmare at Birkenau. So you get this like realization when I was there of 1.3 million people that come into it, and 1.1 million were killed. So only 200,000 survived. About 1 million of the 1.1 million who were killed were Jews. So 90% or so of them. So it's kind of like the trip was a great trip, but I came away from that just assaulted by how evil humanity can become. And it's interesting. I heard a philosopher recently, somebody, they were talking about, and I'm trying to remember who it was. It may have been, I think it may have been Sean McDowell, but I could be wrong. But I thought it was Sean McDowell and his dad Josh were talking once, and McDowell was reflecting how years ago he said something to his dad and said something like that was so inhumane what they did, and his dad corrected him and said, "No, it's utterly human. It's utterly human. Like the human heart does that kind of evil." And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that. I guess because you get this like categorical, stark, like evil that there's no one who goes through Auschwitz who walks out and goes, well, I guess it wasn't that bad. I mean, you go,
that's true.
Oh my word. The human heart is unbelievably maniacally evil. So why would I bring that up? Because I find it almost shocking to my system that if everybody I know who would walk through Auschwitz will say that is a wicked, heinous evil, that we live in a culture right now with how much abortion takes place in our culture of living beings in the womb. 1 million Jews in the lifespan of Auschwitz over a span of probably 2.5 to 3 years of that being utilized to that end. Per year in America right now, last year I looked, according to according to Guttmacher Institute.
I think it was 1.2 or 3.
Yeah, it's
million.
It was
lives.
1,037,000 abortions, according to the formal healthcare system in 2023. And here is the part that I'm stunned by, Brad. Is I am stunned by the fact that right now we have two parties, a Republican Party and a Democratic Party. One we're familiar with being a party that has historically been pro-death. I don't think pro-choice is a good word, but pro-death in terms of the willing killing of living beings in the womb. And in moderate people on that platform would say, well, we're not for late-term abortions. That's often been the Democratic platform, is that we're for it, but some of us are against late-term abortions. And then there are some that are extremists who are, wide open with it. But
why is that? Why do people delineate late term from early term?
Oh, because they use things like the viability of the child in the womb, and if the child could survive outside the womb, somehow the threshold of viability, they say, is what validates it as being a human life. And of course, the problem with that is that viability isn't a statement about what is in the womb. It's a statement about technology's ability to keep alive whatever's in the womb. So it's not at all the case. So you have this live being in the womb who the Democratic platform historically said, go ahead. Yeah, you can. Most of them, you if you choose to, you can kill them. And now we have a Republican platform. We have a Republican platform that has historically been pro-life. Certainly in 2016 was strongly pro-life, and yet with the same candidate is no longer pro-life. It actually is pro-choice, or we could say pro-death, because if we're going to be consistent with that. Now, somebody listening might say, Bryan, that is not true. And I would say, nope, you need to read. It's 100% true. It's 100% true. We'll share a couple of things about this. So what probably some of our listeners may not realize is 2023, 1,037,000 abortions, according to the formal healthcare system. We have this thing that started, it was called RU46, and it's a combination of two pills that you take. One of them is mifepristone. The abortion pill is just a common kind of way it gets referred to. What percentage of, in 2023, abortions were done by the abortion pill?
Well, I only know this because you told me, but I was surprised.
But I think I found a different statistic, and you might even be surprised at what I found.
Right.
Because I found what I had read, and it was an article, and I think that stat was back from 2020 or 2021.
Oh, okay.
2023, 63%.
So
63,
6.3
almost
out of
two-thirds.
10 abortions
Basically
are
two-thirds.
with the pill.
Yes. So you have now basically 650,000 almost, just under that, 635,000 or so of the 1,037,000. So let's think about the fact that 1 million Jews were killed in Auschwitz. Okay, and in a year and two-thirds, that same number of lives will be taken by the abortion pill.
Now, how does this relate to the Republican platform?
Yeah. So here's the Republican platform in 2016, and I'm going to read three parts of it. It's there's different. The Republican platform in 2016 didn't just say abortion. Here's our perspective. It kind of weighed in on abortion in a few different places, whether it had to do with like healthcare and Obamacare, or it had to do with consent issues, or it had to do with mifeprex, which is the same as mifepristone, stuff like that. So,
this is
parts.
2016.
2016 right. Republican Party platform. So Trump's first administration, he won that election, right? Through Obamacare, the current administration has promoted, so the Obama administration has promoted the notion of abortion as health care. We, however, affirm the dignity of women by protecting the sanctity of human life. Numerous studies have shown that abortion endangers the health and well-being of women, and we stand firmly against it. That's the first of three statements. Second, we support the right of parents to consent to medical treatment for their minor children and urge enactment of legislation that would require parental consent for their daughter to be transported across state lines for abortion. Providers should not be permitted to unilaterally withhold services because a patient's life is deemed not worth living. American taxpayers should not be forced to fund abortion. As Democrats abandon this 4-decade-old bipartisan consensus, we call for codification of the Hyde Amendment and its application across the government, including Obamacare. We call for a permanent ban on federal funding and subsidies for abortion and health care plans that include abortion coverage. So,
which is what the Hyde Amendment did.
Yeah, keep our tax dollars away from going to pay for abortions. Then third, we believe the FDA's approval of mifeprex, that's mifepristone or the abortion pill, a dangerous abortifacient, formerly known as RU486, threatens women's health, as does the agency's endorsement of over-the-counter sales of powerful contraceptives without physician's recommendation. We support cutting federal and state funding for entities that endanger women's health by performing abortions in a manner inconsistent with federal or state law. So this is important. That last of the three is highlighting the fact that we see mifeprex or mifepristone, the abortion pill, as a dangerous abortifacient. It threatens women's health. And so you have this language of we're against this. 8 years later, here's the 2024 platform in total on abortion. This is all it says about abortion. Okay? We proudly stand with families and life. We believe that the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States guarantees that no person can be denied life or liberty without due process, and that the states are therefore free to pass laws protecting those rights. Now, I want to stop. I'm going to continue, but the 14th Amendment, the first portion of it is what's called the Equal Rights Act. And that's the idea that each person, it was enacted over against slavery, right? So it's the idea that every human being is worth equal protections. It's a federal amendment. This portion of the platform is actually titled about abortion becoming an issue of the state. So it says here that the states are free to pass laws, right? States are free to pass laws. So it's actually, they've cited the 14th Amendment, which is a federal issue, and they're saying, but the states can pass these laws here. Okay?
So they're saying that the 14th Amendment is their justification for the platform. However, they're not going to enforce the 14th Amendment federally.
Yeah, they're saying that the
idea that everyone has life.
The state now are free to pass laws protecting those rights. Protecting those rights. Which is an interesting language, by the way, because as I read this, I wonder, okay, that would be, what if you interpreted that now states would be open to enact slavery? What would that mean? The same way that they might be open to allow abortion.
Okay. I totally get it.
Interesting deal. So then you have, this is how it continues. After 51 years, because of us, the Republicans, that power has been given to the states and a vote of the people. We will oppose late-term abortion while supporting mothers and policies that advance prenatal care, access to birth control, and IVF. So we're going to support access to IVF, which is a very controversial dynamic, where you have frozen embryos that are being discarded because people are being unwise.
They only need so many.
Yeah. So they're being discarded. So you have the issue of life being discarded largely, pretty significantly through IVF today, and then you have, and they're gonna advance, right, IVF, and then you have that they oppose late-term abortion. That's all it says about abortion. You don't have any language about the abortion pill. That's gone. You don't have any of this parental consent stuff that's talked about. You don't have any of the real strong language about abortion that was there in the 2016 platform. It's completely shifted. Now, it's not only the case in the Republican platform. Trump on the abortion pill, this was in June. The Supreme Court, this is a quote, the Supreme Court just approved the abortion pill, and I agree with their decision to have done that. So he ran on a platform in 2016 that said it's a dangerous abortifacient. It threatens women's health.
So this is the hinge.
Oh, yeah. It's a complete turn. It's a complete turn. That's a pro-choice position. That's not a pro-life position. That's a pro-choice. That's saying, I agree with the decision that 63% of 1,037,000 abortions. So I agree that 635,000 abortions can happen. That's what Trump said. I agree with that, he's saying. J.D. Vance, I think it's important to say that we need to have a conversation in our country about what our abortion policy should be. Donald Trump is the pragmatic leader here. He's right. He is the pragmatic leader.
That's called word ninja.
Oh, yeah. But the pragmatic leader, and the answer is right. That's it. He's not the principled leader.
He's actually very clever in saying that.
Oh, sure.
Well, he is a lawyer, but he's very clever in saying that because he actually is leaving room for maybe his personal opinion.
Well, he would be, but here's the problem. On Meet the Press, when asked if he supported the mifepristone accessibility, he said yes.
So
which he
It's
had up
ubiquitous.
to this point. He had a pretty staunch pro-life record. He had, but again, the pragmatism of politics calls, and
So he's a horrible Catholic as well,
he's following his pragmatic leader. Yeah,
just like our current president.
sure, he's following his pragmatic leader, and so so I want to think about this for a minute, because I go through Auschwitz and everybody nods their head. People are like crying, like this is like insanity. We're looking, going, "Are you kidding me? What's wrong with people?" And now we have two parties in America, both of which are pro-choice. Now we have a candidate that all kinds of people who are evangelicals are going to get behind, who has said, "I approve of a decision that says yes to 635,000 abortions every year." I mean, I'm asking our listeners, how is that not wicked? By any definition of wicked, how is that not wicked? If I can wipe away 635,000 people being killed, and I say, no, I won't do it, I approve of it, how is that not wicked? Help me.
Well, I think
What am I missing?
I think it's because people are jaded and swept away by culture. It's so universalized, the position, that, and it's so undertaught in churches that it's the perfect situation to make a deceptive move for evil and call it good, call it healthcare, call it helpful, even though if we were to peel back the statistics, the data, it's there that they wouldn't have said the abortion bill threatens women's health.
Right.
And I've had a few discussions with our local PRC director
Yeah.
about
Good man.
about the pill, about the abortion pill, and some of the data behind that on how it affects women's health, because he's a researcher. He loves to get into the nuances of it. And it's not like it's an iffy situation. It's very overt that this type of pill should be taken under a doctor's supervision for the health of the person.
Right.
But with COVID, they rolled back mandates and kind of, I don't know if it's laws, but at least the best practices for prescribing it, where all of a sudden you can get it through the mail, you can do a telehealth visit, but that doesn't solve the idea or the problems, I guess, with that are practically happening to women, where they need an on-site physician. They need to be in the ER, in the doctor's office, to test, to do examinations as a result of this pill. That's not even talking about the idea that it's killing a life. That's just, on the face of it, it's not a good idea for women who are pregnant. So I think, to answer your question, we're just so jaded that in general we can't see it.
Do you think that at bottom we just don't believe that the entity in the womb really is the same? Like, I don't know how else to account for it. So that's where I'm left going, I have to think, because because if the platform said, if the platform said, kill, I'm okay, I'm not going to sign a ban on killing 630,000 3-year-olds. I'm not going to sign a ban on that. Who would vote for that? So I have to think at bottom, they just don't think it's the same. And so what this tells me, though, is like that there's people who are pro-life. If you're pro-life and you can talk yourself into, there are enough bad issues on the Democratic platform that you'll vote to support this evil, because it's somehow a lesser evil in an evil equation of math. Okay, that somehow can make it plausible for 635,000 children in the womb to be killed. And you say you're pro-life, you believe they're children. I don't know how you sign off on that. I don't know how you give your yes to that. I don't know how you pragmatically have an ends justifies the means component
Well,
to that.
I can't answer the why you would ask or why you would say that. I can answer the how. I think it goes back to Seinfeld's. There's not. It's not like there's anything wrong with that about being gay.
Yeah.
Well, I think that these messages about, well, it's not a child in the womb. It's not a child in the womb. And media, movies, the songs we listen to, ideas, they talk about life and they talk about other issues to such a degree of repetition that people start believing that, well, maybe I can give on this issue. And then the Bible literacy has eroded so much in our culture that it's almost like it's Satan's crane kick from, Karate Kid. None can defend if done properly. Okay, so to switch the good guys and the bad guys in that movie, I think this is the crane kick.
Okay.
And there's a whole setup of years and years in American culture, mostly American culture. I don't want to blame only lawmakers. I want to blame culture getting the fruit of its reward or of its efforts. So and you think of media today, media, internet, the messages we see, even in movies that it's not overt that it's pro-abortion, but there's a thread in almost every show I see of really three ideas. One is self-proclamation of who you want to be. The second is the homosexual agenda. And the third thread happens to be pro-choice. And they're tiny little threads. And what it's done is woven a whole way of processing life and culture with the erosion of what the Bible would say. So there's no defense to it.
Yes, I do.
So I think that's the how.
Yeah, and I think maybe another how is, and this is the part that it makes it even in some ways worse for me because I feel like it's mind-boggling that we would be here. But one of the counterpoints I can hear somebody making is, yeah, but Bryan, when you read the whole platform, they're supporting parental rights. Mm-hmm. They're, standing for other value structures that we hold dear in our culture. They're standing against woke kind of intersectionality and issues like that and so forth. So I would come back and I would say this, though. I would say if I know someone who says, man, I ain't woke and I stand against all those ideologies and I am for parental rights and I want you to be able to choose where you send your kid to school. And I am for immigration reform. I want to keep people safe. I'm going to support the police. And I'm gonna really make sure that those values are treasured in America. And oh, by the way, I have one other position. I'm okay with signing off on 635,000 3-year-olds being killed. None of that weighs such a degree that I would go, well, let me think about the greater good. That is absurd. Like that's some of the arguments I've heard. I hear that argumentation, Brad, and I'm like, I can't believe I'm hearing this. How did we get to that place where this all of a sudden so counterbalances something? So my point is, you might say, well, that's a one-issue vote. If it is, it is. What I would say, and I've shared this with you before, I'm a one-issue non-voter. Like, it doesn't mean it's the only issue I'm concerned about, but it means it's the one issue that if you support the murder of children, I'm out. You don't get my vote, no matter what other good stuff you put up.
Yeah, I think back to our discussion on principle versus pragmatics. I think people are seeing this through just one lens, the pragmatics, and not seeing that the principled solution is the long game, but it's also potentially the short game. They, but that's not what they're believing. They're saying the practical is the short game,
Yeah.
and the principle is the long game potentially. But I think there's two ways I conceptualize how we engage these ideas politically, not religiously. So,
Okay.
from a church perspective, we need to engage culture from the inside out. So, we're sharing the gospel, we're loving each other, we're invitational, we're helpful, we're salt and light in salt and light and decay and darkness. So that's the religious side. But from a political side, I think we see it as we're building something. So if we can build these ideas, if this one doesn't come along right away, if we get all the apparatus to build it again, okay, we can lump this one back in later.
Yeah.
Okay? That's not reality.
No.
Reality is that we're a bulwark against a tidal wave of evil.
Correct.
And there's certain things that are principled, but then there's certain really key things that once you erode it, it's like, remember when there was the erosion on the hill over here, and they had built a development up there, and I remember seeing on TikTok or Instagram this house just crumbling, and it was all because they had skimped on the site planning and the development that was actually needed. They thought they could compromise, and that's what it is. Like evil is running downhill,
Yeah.
not uphill.
That's right.
So to conceptualize it as, well, the good stuff is going to come later,
Yeah.
it never comes.
It's mythological. It's also not recognizing that because of the Supreme Court justice appointments, a lot of ground was gained. We're not in the weak posture right now. We're in the captain's seat, and we're acting like we're not in the captain's seat with it. By the way that we're relating to the issue, because again, we're going to follow the pragmatic leader here, and in following the pragmatic leader here, we're looking for electability, and we're throwing out the lives of. We're literally throwing out the lives of children. So I was thinking about this, and it goes
Okay.
to something you said. I want to share a verse that boy, Brad, this hit me so hard when I saw this.
All right.
So let me. I'm going to give you almost like a logical flow, and finish it with a verse of scripture. Okay.
I'll see if I can follow it.
Here you go.
I didn't do well in
Okay.
logic.
It is wicked to approve of the murder of over 600,000 children in the womb per year. Agreed? It's wicked.
Yep.
Okay. The abortion pill kills that many.
Okay.
The Trump-Vance ticket approves of that pill. Those who vote for them are not standing against wickedness. I want to be careful with the language. I said they're not standing against it, okay? Because somebody might say, well, I'm not for it. Okay, but you're not standing against it if you're voting for them, okay?
Okay.
Proverbs 25:26. Like a muddied spring or a polluted fountain is a righteous man who gives way before the wicked. Like a muddied spring or a polluted fountain is a righteous man who gives way before the wicked. So somebody who says, Bryan, I'm pro-life, but all these good pieces, and I know there's this one, and I'll swallow. Like a muddied spring or a polluted fountain is a righteous man who gives way before the wicked. Ephesians 5:11, take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness. Instead, expose them. If you don't think the murder of 635,000 children in a womb is an unfruitful work of darkness, I have no idea what you would call that unfruitful work of darkness. We have to expose that.
That should be our starting place.
It should be.
Because if we go back to the garden, the starting place of evil multiplying is when life with God was taken away.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of this extinguishing a life is kind of seminal to what is good and evil, I would say.
Very, very much so. Very much so. So, I kind of want to leave us there. I just want people
I thought
to
you wanted to
think
get fired
about
up
that.
a little bit more.
I just can't. I read that verse and I think we all have an opportunity. The opportunity right now is simply to say we're not going to give way to wickedness. And if we don't call this what it is, if we don't stand against it, we're going to give way to it. And a righteous man who does that is a muddied spring or polluted fountain. God keep us from that. That's what we've got for you today. Think about these things as you go throughout the rest of your week. Take care.